Welcome, fourth graders, to Home Learning Day 25, May 4th, fourth grade science. Boys and girls, I hope you are loving the learning at home and enjoyed learning about the dairy industry and simple machines. And one additional thing that was in the dairy industry book, or actually that was an agriculture in Wisconsin book, was discussion of soil. So we're going to have that discussion today, and I want you to be thinking of these terms as we go through our activities. Natural resource, topsoil, sandy soil, clay soil, decomposition, physical change, chemical change, properties, and of course, scientific method. Now, hopefully, some of you have started your hole. If you haven't, remember last video I said if you had extra time, you might want to start on your hole. Well, that's where we're going to head right now, to our hole in our garden. Boys and girls, hopefully you have your holes dug in your backyard now, of course, only with your parents' permission. And I did a little bit more digging. I want you guys to see a little bit closer the difference in types of soil that are in the ground. As you can see, the top soil there, and that's what it's called, the topsoil, it's more darker. It has a mixture of, rock sand and all kinds of decaying debris called humus. And that humus comes from decaying matter. As you look down closer to that more red soil, that is clay on the bottom there, and that is just simply smashed up rocks. It's really tight sandy soil. It's even smaller than sand. It's that clay comes from the breaking up of rocks. So the topsoil, that blacker soil that you see there, boys and girls, that comes from decaying matter. It's a mixture of broken rock and things have decayed. Decaying animals, leaves, mulch, like my wife's got some mulch over there, cow manure, things like that. This is our garden. And when we first started this garden, it was all clay, it was all red. But we've been adding different things to it to decay, so that would be more natural topsoil. As we take a closer look at our hole and our layers of dirt and our different types of soil, we can see that there is definitely a line, boys and girls, that you can see where the topsoil is on top, and that's that mixture of, little rock, sand, and all kinds of other things with humus, humus, which is decaying plant matter and animal matter, live matter that's decaying. And then where the clay is down at the bottom, the clay is just really crushed up, really fine rock. And before it becomes clay, it's actually sand. So if you see that really closely, it's more of a red here, and then this is a darker color, or a blackish color. So sometimes the topsoil is on really top of like a sandy area. Some soils are very sandy, especially in the central part of our state. So that's how the soil looks under the ground. And so we have our topsoils that are darker, and then we have our clay, and then we have our sandy soils too. And within all of this, there's little pieces of rock. You can see some rock right there, and that rock breaks down into the sand and eventually into clay. And if it's mixed in with humus, decaying plant and animal matter, you get that great topsoil, which has full of nutrients and things that plants need to grow, so you can grow good food crops and people can have yummy things to eat. So there you go.
Now, boys and girls, if you remember the lessons that Squanto taught the pilgrims, he taught the pilgrims it's important to nourish the soil, and he had them adding fish to their gardens. And that's what we do. Part of Earth Day celebration is my family goes out and tries to clean up some of the invasive species out of the local waters, and this is a common carp right here in the middle. And they are very invasive. They're not good for our ecosystems around here. There's a lot of them, and a lot of people have that opinion. So we go out there and we try to take as many out as possible as part of the Earth Day celebration. My boys also went out and got some other what's called rough fish that people really don't harvest for eating, and they got a bullfin, also known as, sometimes people call those dogfish, and then a sucker. Now, when we did our fish dissecting, that's the type of fish that we dissected. That is a sucker right there. Okay, so then we throw them in the ground just like Squanto suggested, and we bury them up, and they decompose really super quick. They break down, the little bacteria breaks them down underneath in the soil, and they turn into some really beautiful black soil. So that's how we keep our garden going well, basically following the advice of Squanto years and years later. And I'm also helping the environment by taking some of the rough fish out that kind of are wrecking the ecosystem, particularly carp. Carp are very invasive, very destructive to the ecosystems of the water. You can see that our fish that we've been using for fertilizer, they're all covered up underneath, and there's a little bit more room for some more fertilizer fish in there. My boys usually harvest this with their bow fishing. It's a really up and coming sport, and usually it's always carp, and you only can harvest rough fish in this. Boys and girls, let's take a closer look at the three main types of soil. Over here we have our topsoil, which we already talked about how it's made up of little pieces of rock and sand and once living matter, organic matter like grass and trees and dead animals and insects. So it's really dark. It has a lot of nutrients for the plants to use. It's on the top of the soil where those living things end up when they're dead. And look at it closer, we can see that it gets pretty fine, and there's different things in here. You can see little pieces of rock. It's really dark. It's dusty when you break it up. So then sand is really just broken up pieces of rock, and you can see how as it breaks up even more here, these are little pebbles in here, but those little bitty the dusty small pieces that we all like in our sandbox, those are really fine grains of sand. Okay, that comes from larger rocks that break down. And then this is clay right here, and we'll break it up. It's kind of a reddish color, and it's really broken up sand that's been really smashed and really powdery. When it's dried out, boys and girls, it's really powdery, really smooth. And this is the same basic stuff that you use in art. So let's take a look at then where the sand and the clay comes from. Right there, it comes from rocks. So those were in the garden too. I pulled those out of the garden also. So those break down and make up our sand and then our clay. And then sand and clay is mixed in with our topsoil, which is a mixture of humus and
the sand and clay and other things. So there you go. 3 types of three types of soil: topsoil, sand, and clay. Now, boys and girls, if you haven't had a chance to dig a hole in your backyard yet, ask your mom and dad for permission. There's probably a special spot in which you can dig a hole. You should never just dig a hole randomly, because there's power lines and cables and things underneath the ground. So you always need to have permission, and I'm serious about that, boys and girls. See if you can find some different types of soil. If you dig down far enough, you'll find different types of soil. You probably won't find big globs of sand, but you certainly will find some clay. So, and then take your topsoil, get it together, get a magnifying glass, and describe its properties and its characteristics you see. Remember, scientists make observations, and do the same thing with the sand. Make some observations. What characteristics or properties does it have? Describe how it feels. Same thing with the clay. And then draw and label what you found on a piece of paper. And use a magnifying glass if you have it. And a more advanced technique would be to take some water and mix it in with each one, and see how each type of soil acts differently or forms differently when you put water into it. You're not just making a mud pie, because some of this soil will turn into a muddy pie, but others, the water will just kind of pass through, will get wet, but it really won't do anything. So that's a characteristic or property of these different types of soil. They handle water different. And those are important things that farmers often need to think about when they plant different types of crops. So why don't you do that little experiment, and then maybe if we have a chance to talk again on the video conference like we did this week, that we can talk about how they act differently with water.
Boys and girls, you're probably wondering how that rock breaks up and turns into sand and then into clay. Well, it's through a process of weathering. The water will drip on a rock and it wear it away. And sometimes these rocks will be tumbling in streams or rubbing against each other in the ground, and they'll scrape against each other and break off a piece, and they'll break off another piece and get smaller and smaller. So that's how rocks turn into sand and then clay. So this is an activity that you can do where you can observe, and you can watch the rock very slowly wear away as the drips of water go on it. So, one important advice I have to give you: always put the cap on your drain. It's very hard to get things out of there. Like when you clean a duck and a BB goes in there, it's hard to get those BBs out, and the disposal makes a weird sound, and then you spend a weekend putting a new one in. So we don't want that to happen. So always, with any sort of experiment, ask your mom and dad. So you can just watch that weather away.
Well, boys and girls, I hope those first 2 activities for this video went well for you. How did that soil look close up? How long did you watch that rock weather? Well, let's not forget that when we observe, we use all of our senses. Let's sing our scientific method song: observation, question, hypothesis, test. But we're not done yet. Record, analyze, draw conclusions. Yeah! Okay, well, that was very interesting watching that rock weather by the water running on it, but it also weathers by wind and air blowing on it too. Let's take a look at that also. Boys and girls, there's our rock that we've been watching weather, so it's nice and clean from all that water that went over it. And now let's make a hypothesis about what we think, or how about let's start with a question. How does rock weather? How can it weather away by wind? Well, question, hypothesis. Well, I think it breaks down in little pieces. Hypothesis, test. So test, well, we're going to have to test it by blowing some wind on it.
Oh, look at that. The science department has a wind machine. Let's give that a shot. Let's use that wind machine to try to weather that rock. Okay, boys and girls, I went and retrieved the rock, which had been moving, and sometimes that actually happens. Little pebbles and things will blow in the wind, and they rub against other rocks like our cement, and they start wearing away slowly. And that's what happens in a stream. They'll roll down in the stream, the water will move it, and they'll get smaller and smaller and smaller until they turn into this, sand. Now, as the wind blows, it picks up sand and dirt and dust, and it blows it against exposed rock. So let's give that a try. Well, boys and girls, does our rock look smaller to you? I don't know. This must be one of those science things that take a lot of years. Boy, but I know one thing for sure. I have a lot of dirt that's on all around the edge here, and Mrs. Sicky is not going to be happy. Well, one of the science rules is to keep your air clean and clean up. So before we move on, I better get going and clean up. Well, did you prove your hypothesis, boys and girls? Did you answer your question? Now you're down to writing your did and see for these different labs we've been doing, and writing down some learns and drawing some conclusions. Now, that was taking a long time to make that rock smaller. It really doesn't look that much smaller to me. I don't know how much we weathered away on it or not. I have an idea, boys and girls. Here, you probably want to make a rock shaker, and we certainly will get results with that. So come on with me. Let's make a rock shaker. First thing you have to do is get a bunch of rocks. So go ahead in that hole, find some rocks from somewhere, and I'll meet you back in the science kitchen. Boys and girls, we're back in the science kitchen. For this activity, to make your rock shaker, to help you create weathered rock quicker, you'll need some sort of clear container. It doesn't necessarily need to be clear, but orange juice container like that, or I have often used, I think what works the best is a empty 2-liter bottle of soda. And I know there's a couple fourth graders that like to work on like emptying out containers so that they can have the appropriate materials, like when somebody ate a bunch of ice cream, so we could have the appropriate containers. So there you go, there's another job for you. Now, you'll need, of course, a bunch of rocks. I don't know if I have enough there. And then some sort of utensil, a knife or scissors, to cut you're going to cut this apart right here. Cut that in half. You can cut that juice container in half. And then some tape, because then you're going to tape it back together. I have some duct tape there. So the first thing you have to do is, of course, get your drain cap in there because, like I told you, you don't want anything to go down there. I always remember to do that since the babies went down there. And you're going to get that going, and you really need to wash your rocks up really good. I would even use a little soap, actually, on these. Put a little soap on them, and you know, a little soap, get the rocks really clean. Because what you're trying to do is you really want to see if you can create some weathered rocks. So you really want to get it clean just in case there's some dirt or dust or something on here, so that you start with rocks that are clean. They don't have any sand or dirt or dust or anything on it. So you really can see that. So you want to put all these in here very gently. You might want to ask your mom and dad for a drain pad so that you don't wreck it. Of course, all these activities are done under your parents' supervision, and so you want to clean that up. Look at all the dirt and grime that came off these just from sitting here. So I'm going to get these cleaned up, and then I'm going to do the next step. So there you go. Well, there you go, boys and girls. I have my rocks all cleaned up and dried off, and I was really careful in this sink not to scratch the sink. And now I need to cut open my container here. So I got my knife there, and I'm not going to cut it open. As a 10-year-old, I'm going to yell, "Mom! Dad! I need my container cut open." So that's what you're doing right now.
Just as suspected, fourth graders, I did not have quite enough rock, so this time I made sure I laid down a little pad so that I don't scratch up my sink. So you make sure you guys do that too.
Okay, my rocks are all washed up and in my container, and I have my tape, and I'm going to tape this top back on here, and we'll take it from there then. Well, there you go, your rock shaker. You're ready to make some soil. Let's get shaking. Boys and girls, if you're going to turn this into soil, you really have to shake it a lot. So get shaking it everywhere. Get shaking when you walk into the house. Shake it at breakfast. Get shaking. You got to do a lot of shaking. We're making our soil. Shake it in the car. Keep shaking it. Shake it in the laundry room while you're helping your mom do the laundry. Shake it while you're helping your dad load the dishwasher. Yeah. Shake it while you're getting your mail. Keep shaking it everywhere. Keep shaking it. Have a friend shake it. Have your friend help you shake it. Shake it while you run around your house. Get running, guys. Shake it. Shake it. Keep shaking it. Shake it day and night, boys and girls. Shake it. Well, boys and girls, that's been a lot of shaking. Let's see how much weathering we did. I think my arm's a little bit sore. Let's take off that cap. Wow. Did a good job shaking, huh? Holy moly. Well, that's a lot of shaking in our simulated weathering shaker. It really did work. Holy cow. Look at that sand. Well, that's how sand's made, but usually in nature it's through some sort of weathering and rolling of rocks in the tide and through the creek and in the river and rubbing against each other in the ground. So now you take your rock shaker and shake it a lot and empty her out right out the lab sheet and tell us your findings. Okay, go for it, fourth graders. Boys and girls, I hoped you learned something about soil and
nature and science from those videos. And of course, I just want to restate that make sure you double check with mom and dad before you do any of these activities, because some of them could make a mess, and you don't want to get hurt doing any of them. We would do all these at school. So mom and dad will have to supervise you on these. And let's review some of the terms that we had talked about. Boys and girls, soil is a natural resource. And there's three types of natural resources. There's renewable resources, non-renewable resources, and inexhaustible resources. Which one do you think soil is, and which one do you think topsoil is? Of course, we learned about topsoil. That's mixture of rock and sand and all kinds of other soils, along with humus, decaying plant and animal matter. Then we talked about sandy soil, clay soil, decomposition. That's how the topsoil is made. The physical change of rocks into sand and clay. And then we didn't mention this word, chemical change. In order for us to get that good healthy topsoil with humus in it, there's some chemical changes that are done by little bacteria on the decaying plant and animal matter. Of course, you need to think about the properties when you describe things in science, particularly what are the properties of topsoil, sandy soil, and clay. And then, of course, we always are thinking with the scientific method. Boys and girls, I wanted to add this word on the board. This is the word humus, which I was talking about, and a lot of people get confused with this word when they're talking about a dip called humus. Those are two different things. Boys and girls, I will include a lab sheet with my communication, and I don't expect you to write a lab sheet up for all the activities, but I certainly would ask you to choose one. So make a choice and write a lab sheet up for one of the activities. And do a good job. Put some effort into it. Well, thank you, fourth graders, for watching. Now, keep working hard. It's beautiful outside and there's great opportunities to play outside, but learning is also a beautiful thing. So keep working hard and try to double check some of my hypotheses. Scientists do their activities many times to make sure that they're correct. So I'd like to know if you get as much sand out of your rock shakers as I did. So I'm hopefully that everybody does that one, but I gave you the option of doing a lab sheet for the other couple of activities too. So yep, try to do all the activities, but certainly write up a lab sheet. I'm hoping to get the one on the rock shakers, but you could do something on the soil, or the decomposing, or the weathering. Go for it, boys and girls. And as always, go Zephyrs!